Welcome to Brand Me. I'm Preston Konrad, and this is the podcast about doing your own thing, whether it's building a personal brand, maximizing your side hustle, or making the most of your everyday.
I think that sort of social media is the Madison Avenue, really, of the 90s. It's really what it's all about.
Hey, everybody. On today's show, we are talking about building a brand based on expertise. I'm joined by Dr. Loretta. She is a dermatologist for over 40 years and the founder of Dr. Loretta Skincare, which is one of my personal favorite brands that I use every single day and night. But we get into how she started her brand, to working with her family members, to launching a brand in a really crowded field of skincare and beauty. But this is such a heartwarming, kind, and insightful conversation. I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Loretta. I mean, I have to say, I feel like I'm sitting with one of my Instagram heroes right now. It's so good to meet you.
So good for me to meet you because the feeling's super mutual.
I mean, I have become such a huge, you know who turned me on to you and your expertise in your brand was Charlotte Palomino. Mm-hmm. And her and I have become friends via the internet. And she's a wealth of knowledge like you, but I'm so happy to have found your brand.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, and we all love Charlotte. So that's a real mutual admiration society too.
I had her on the podcast and she was a hoot, and it was just, she's doing great things in the skincare space too. And, you know, for a brand like yours that is quite literally filling my medicine cabinet as a,
wonderful,
38-year-old guy, how did you get your start, in this business by, you now have one of the buzziest brands out there, but how did you get started in this world?
Well, so, a lot of life just sort of happens to you. So I got to tell you, I started medical school in 1974 thinking I'd become an OB/GYN or a pediatrician. But after my first year of medical school, which was in New York City, there was an opportunity to go up and do some research at a lab in Harvard. So I go up there and, I'm very chatty. I've always been, I continue to be. So I'm there in the morning and the person who was running the lab, the dermatologist, says to me, I got to tell you something, Loretta, you've got this project. I understand you don't know that much about dermatology. He said, but we're going to go to the cafeteria. Don't even mention what you're doing because there are a lot of people here who sort of think this is a little bit of an off idea. And what the project was that I got to test some of the effects of UVA on human skin. Even taking a UVA meter out on the lawn of Harvard Medical School to see if there was enough UVA to have any effect on our skin, if you can imagine.
Wow.
This was 1975. We didn't use there was no real UVA protection from sunscreens, whatever. So, I sort of instantly became a huge fan of dermatology research. I just was so intrigued by it that I just dumped the whole idea of becoming an OB. I went on to marry my classmate and have 4 kids of my own anyway. And we've been very happy for 45 years. And so I was sort of always from the very beginning, part clinician and part really somebody who was a very out of the box researcher clinically. Patients would come in and say to me, this is what's going on. And then when I would tell them what I thought about it, they'd say, but wait a sec, you're the 5th dermatologist I've seen and nobody has ever explained it that way. Wow, I get it. And that's sort of what led me, believe it or not, Conrad, 30 years ago, I started to formulate skincare just for professionals. And then to
was that
launch
just
this,
to sell in your, so that would be just to be in your practice or kind of be within the medical community?
And for other doctors too, right? Then what happened, which was wonderful, was we have these 4 great kids. My youngest and oldest daughter, and we have a son too, but our youngest and oldest, who are now 32 and 40 years old, we were sitting, about 5 years ago around the dining room table. And they said, you know what, Mom, you've got such a very different approach, not only to skincare, but I have a very positive approach to aging. I think it's something all of us are afraid of, especially that idea of our skin aging. And they said, how about really coming out with you and your own brand? That's sort of how I got into it. I've got to thank Liza and Gina, my 2 daughters, because, without them, I don't think that I would have had the wherewithal, maybe not the guts, to really come up with this product that's called Dr. Loretta.
I mean, especially now too. I mean, what a crowded landscape, more than I can ever remember. Brands that are quote, expert based, medical based, influencer started. It's a really crowded space. Did you feel nervous coming into such a crowded space, even though you have all this amazing expertise? Were you
Yes.
trepidatious there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I really felt, and so much, you just sort of like hit the nail on the head here, Conrad. One of the things I felt was, okay, we'll put my name on the product, but just the fact that I'm a dermatologist now for 40 years, it's sort of not enough. And so I really came up with like a very specific brand philosophy, brand platform, which has to do with the fact that after seeing so many patients where I do these total body exams, I see like I've got 90-year-olds where, they look scary on their faces, but when I look at their backsides, sometimes I even take their pictures to show them that the areas that don't get exposed to the environment just don't age. So I really came up with the whole sense of this would be our platform. We're going to make products that are going to protect you from all of those external aggressors, because I couldn't agree with you more. I was already recognizing that with the whole indie craze, there are so many brands out there. And I wanted to really give the consumer something that was truly unique enough and worthwhile and based on my whole 40 years of practice and all of this kind of stuff.
It is really unique. I mean, there's, forgive me if I'm saying it wrong, but the one that I'm on my like 10 millionth bottle, what is it? The Intense Replenishing Serum.
Serum, you got it.
And it's unlike anything else I've ever experienced. And I do live in a very big, crowded, dirty city. I live in Manhattan. And now it took me 40 years to realize that there's environmental stressors around me. Did you find success right away by leaning into a niche of things that weren't at Sephora and that weren't at Ulta because I've never seen a product like yours before.
Yes.
Or did people need a little explaining?
Well, I've got to tell you something. And what I'd say, like for all of your listeners, is I'm a real believer in like you stay in your own lane. Okay. Yep. So coming up with sort of that brand platform of really protecting ourselves from these 4 external aggressors that age us, that was my platform. But then when it was really coming down to formulating the products, I'd had a lot of experience already. I've drawn on my, 30 years of going to ingredient manufacturers and shows and stuff. So for that particular product, I have to tell you that the first time that I was ever at an ingredient meeting, and I saw that now you could biosynthesize, you could replicate these things called skin lipids. Truly, Conrad, I'll never forget going back to my dermatology office, opening up my super thick textbook, which was edited by the head of the lab I worked at, right? And looking up just what were lipids, okay? I mean, this goes back, right? And I said, oh my God, I just can't believe that we can actually synthesize the thing that my grandkids, let's say, have like velvet on their skin.
Oh, yeah.
Which is these lipids, right? Once we reach puberty, we start to make a lot more sebum. We don't have those velvety lipids. So it's sort of that. And then the other part of it was in that serum that you like, and probably you like it in part because it just feels so good,
well, it
right?
Feels so silky and like it
right?
I feel like a glazed donut after I put it on. I love it.
Right. But also, besides that immediate effect, you've got this preventative thing because we got this ingredient called lipochromin. That's also where I think that I differ a lot from a lot of the brands talking about quote unquote natural and all this, because lipochromin, that also dates way back. It was originally made only for intravenous use. It's the strongest antioxidant made. It's actually synthesized.
Wow.
They took vitamin E, super, took that kind of the concept of it and made it so super covering that it's the strongest thing you've got for antioxidants. So it's going to really protect you from pollution. And I don't know, Conrad, there's like so much of this because I've got to tell you too, through the years, right? I was shocked when I read that New York City has a much higher wrinkle score. The people in New York are more wrinkled than the people in Miami.
You're telling me. It must be because we're stressed too, though.
Well, okay. So number one's pollution. Now, stress, listen, every note I'd say that I write in my dermatology office, part of the plan, whether it's because you're wrinkled or because you've got psoriasis, I always talk about stress relief, right?
Yep.
Because you are right. So, we blame the wrinkling in New York City from pollution, which does a lot to promote wrinkles. But stress is another really important thing. Like I always talk about stress management,
Yep.
whether it's to age better or to just help things like hives or psoriasis.
What do
we
you
got
do
to
to
keep it under
de-stress?
control.
What do you do
I
to
do?
de-stress?
Okay. So one thing, like this is what I do myself, and I'm going to suggest it to you.
Okay.
I love to just sit in a comfortable chair.
Yep.
And, I use my mind. I think of my mind like my closet. You know how it's been said that, if something in your closet doesn't bring you joy, get rid of it, right?
Yep.
So I start to sort of like inventory what's going through my mind, whether it's actual practical stuff like my schedule for tomorrow, or things that I'm sort of ruminating on that happened, yesterday, which if it happened yesterday, so what?
Yep.
And I say, hey, if it didn't bring me joy, I'm actually going to omit it. That's one thing I do. The other thing I highly recommend, because I've got not very long, in like less than 60 days, I'm turning 69 years old. I'll be in my 70th year of life.
I'm obsessed with your whole story. This is amazing. You look amazing.
So this is the other thing I'm going to suggest to everybody. We spend so much time with our minds, but we don't really spend much time sort of like having this gratitude for our respiratory system, our heart, nurturing it. So I actually, as part of my whole stress relief, every day, I actually give myself this big hug. And it starts sort of like, oh my God, my musculoskeletal, I love Pilates. I feel this beautiful musculature that I'm so thankful for. Then I sort of go, right? So it starts in my arms. Then I go and hug my chest. My heart's beating, it's something to be like, spend
Get really
a few
proud
minutes.
of.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. I take these workout classes, and a lot of the times I go to this spins. I go to Soul Cycle, and there are some really soulful teachers, and some of them, they say, thank your body for what you were able to just get through today and your strong legs and whatever. And it's like something you take for granted. I love that.
And it really helps to really put the whole stress thing in perspective, because stress is almost all just coming from overactive minds.
Well, I've got one of those. I'll tell you that. Speaking of stress, something that stresses me out sometimes, and because it's a big part of my job, is promoting my brands and my personal brand on social media. How have you navigated? You launched your brand, your packaging's beautiful. Clearly the expertise is there. The efficacy is there. How do you navigate the social media side of commerce? Do you have help there, or does that stress you out?
Yes. So, we definitely have some help. Really, I'm going to call out my daughter, Liza, who is 32, and then her helper, Ariel, with social media, who's just in her 20s, because it really skews young.
Yep.
I think for social media, what you really need to do is be yourself, and really let everyone know who you are. I also think with social media, since starting the brand, it really, for what we really sort of consider an anti-aging brand, we found, wow, because so much growth comes from social media, it skews very young.
Right.
And so you've got to sort of really be talking to a very big sort of catchment area from really people in their 20s up till, I don't know, I'm hoping, like I say, I have a little over a year till I turn 70. I wish more of my peers would really get into social media. I try to turn them on to it, whether it's for travel stuff, your decorating stuff, all of this. But it's super important. I mean,
it really is. And that's where, it's funny. There's so much, the customer doesn't have to go somewhere to consider buying a brand. They can say quickly on social, you know what? I like the bottle. You know what? I like the name. You know what? Oh, it says it promises XYZ. So you kind of have to be all of those things: efficacious, cool design, frequently posting. How did you come up with your brand look and feel? Because I love personally the way your products look on my shelf. I just think they work for a guy, they work for a girl. I love it.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. So a couple of things. Number one, I had already, because I was helping with formulating, I had already been going to packaging shows. But when we decided with my two daughters to make the Dr. Loretta brand, we literally had the warehouse filled with like 100 bottles, right? Because,
Yep.
I'm really sort of a stickler, like we do package compatibility testing for the formulas and all of this. So I wanted it to be very good looking
Yep, it
because
is.
one of the biggest things, thank you, one of the biggest things that I found is that once you put it away in your medicine cabinet or, under the sink, you
Yep.
forget that you've got it. So I wanted it to look nice enough that it could be left out. And I didn't sort of want it to be anything that would clash, so that was
Yep.
sort of, and just really to be attractive and, something that you sort of wanted to have. I think that unfortunately, okay, in beauty, how something looks does matter. As the dermatologist in me, I think it shouldn't matter how the packaging looks. But, I think that we all judge the books by the cover.
We do. And you know what's funny? I think we went through right up until COVID. I think we were really in that phase of like the cooler looking, the more I'll buy it. But then there was this crazy thing that happened during COVID on TikTok and Instagram with Cetaphil. And it became hot, and CeraVe, and they became hot again. And it was about barrier and gentle, and no one commented that the packaging looks old school and kind of clinical. And it was a nice moment of relief. It was like, hey, these unsung heroes are getting a moment of street cred again. It felt nice,
Yes, I agree. And I think what I loved about that was you're not necessarily, of course, I totally favor CeraVe based on ceramides, which are like the lipids, over Cetaphil. But what I love about that is that to me, a lot of that has to do with body care. And, all of these brands like mine and really all the indie brands, they're mostly focusing on our face. And we can't neglect that, wow, it's wintertime. Let's be putting this up and down our legs. I love to put the CeraVe cream all over my dry legs, and it's great. So yeah, I agree with you. I love that. And I think, skincare in general has really had a boom with COVID. Maybe we just have a lot more time to think about not just the present day and going maybe to the office where we've got to have the hair just right, but what are we doing now so that we're going to look good next week, next month, next year?
So true. What kind of, for people listening that maybe they're interested in starting a product line, or they're like you, where maybe one day they'll turn their expertise down the road into a product line. What are some of the kind of goods and bads and uglies of the beauty world in particular of starting a brand? I imagine, it's a bit challenging.
Yeah, no, I think for sure it is. What I would say is that you need to have, we talked about how with social being such an important part of really getting your brand going, I think you need to have really sort of like a diversity to the age groups on your team.
Yeah.
I think for sure, especially with social, I find that people in their 20s are wonderful. Charlotte, who I think is in her 30s, maybe, she's a little, exception, let's say. But I think that you need a lot of diversity with your team to get in some younger people who tend to be much more into social. The next thing I think is, you've really got to think it all out and don't jump the gun, right? If you are even sort of approached by maybe someone who could make a big order, that you could be putting your products into a place where, there's going to be big volume, you've got to be sure you're ready. The other thing that I think is, think about what your brand positioning is, your brand platform. For us, the platform that we decided on was pretty darn complicated, right? I mean, it's absolutely the most credible thing to me. We just age because of external exposures. If our skincare protects us or addresses the exposures, it's great. But in the days of social where things are really sort of coming down to 30 or 60-second sound bites. What you've got to do is make sure that you sort of keep on educating, and don't be so worried about repetition. So I think before like jumping right in, it's probably a very good idea to sort of really see what's already out there, even though I believe in staying in your own lane and you should come up with the focus of your skincare, but then take a look at how other lines are presenting themselves at what does and doesn't work.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Before I launched my home fragrance brand of my candles and hand wash, I was very much a user of the marketplace. Like I understood who was selling what, how much it cost, what they offered versus what I wanted to offer. I think it's about being the ultimate consumer of the category, so you know what's kind of missing, right? By the way, how many products did you launch with when you launched?
So we launched with 11. We've just been introducing a new product about every 8 to 12 months. And those 11, by the way, took us about 4.5 years to perfect. So remember, it's the formula. Then I did the clinical testing. We had to decide on the packaging. Really being prepared is super important for to launch a skincare brand or any brand. I think you know that so well yourself too, right, Konrad, to really do the
you have to be prepared and do your homework. I mean, in those 4 years, did you ever feel, because things move so fast, I try to work with blinders on so I don't get distracted. But in those 4 years, are you like, oh my gosh, look what so-and-so was doing. We got to get out now. The market's changing. How'd you battle that?
Yeah. So I sort of saw all of that going on, right? We use a good amount of pink, which we decided on way before launch. And by the time we launched, pink and, different shades of pink became very sort of commonplace. At first, it was a lot more unique, right? And we wanted it sort of to be sort of like a skin tone kind of palette and all. And so, I think the most important thing is you've got to believe in yourself. That is more important than anything. And if you need to work at it, because for your consumer to believe in you, consumers are very savvy these days.
So smart.
Right? Exactly. So, you really have to believe in yourself. If there seem to be setbacks, I would say that probably our biggest setback from which we learned the most was the realization that I just can't simply come out here and say, hey, it's only the skin that gets exposed to external factors that ages. I'm going to protect you from those factors. To me, given my years of experience, it sounded so right and such a unique position. But then what I've learned is, hey, it just is not, it's not going to go over always all that well. We've got to keep on educating. So believe in yourself first. If it's going to take therapy, if it's going to take meditation, whatever it is to be successful, the consumer must believe in you, and they never will unless you are very confident within yourself.
I love that. The consumer will believe in you. I mean, speaking of you, I've been noticing more lately, just because there's so much more video on Instagram, I get to see your beautiful face all the time, a lot more often. How do you find the reception of the founder being out there more on social? Do you think is that helping the brand a lot? Is it adding some cred and some familiarity?
Yes, I think it is. I think, I have to say to you that I think that I'm a very unique founder. I don't know if there's another one over the age of 65, almost so close to 70, for which I'm super grateful, right? So I think that it is absolutely adding some credibility. I think that I have to be very aware of the fact that I might not be as easy to identify with as founders, of which there are many in their 20s and 30s. But, I've got that unique message, and I'm hoping that I can really make everyone feel so positive about aging.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. I mean, you've carved a niche there. I also think just in these short sound bites that you're just as a compliment, you often hit with a lot of expertise. It's not just listening to a founder just for the sake of talking about their brand.
Thank you.
It's a helpful takeaway, whether it's sunscreen or something like that.
Thank you.
Hey, what do you think about, I just saw in the news the other day, Scarlett Johansson is launching a skincare, it's one of the 9 millionth celebrity brands. And I love my celebrities and I love my skincare. Do you have any sort of point of view on all these different people coming out with brands? Do you think it's going to be too much soon? I mean, it's so much.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, I feel it's already a very dizzying array out there, and it's very hard to really choose. But I think that really what it is with the celebrities is, it's very lucrative to do it, right? Yeah. To use your name. I think that for the consumer, they've got to try to look into whether the product is going to work for them or not, and don't worry whether it's Dr. Loretta or a beautiful Scarlett Johansson, it's got to be what works for you. And then I think really importantly, it's just got to be that you keep the faithfulness to it. What I'm trying to do lately on social is to really talk about helping people to create a regimen that you stick with.
Well, that's the thing. I think so many people, even friends of mine, because I take really good care of my skin. I'm pretty religious. I repeat purchase items. But a lot of people have this, they feel like skin ADD, like there's a million new products that come in. I got to try this. So-and-so said, try this, where they're not just sitting and trying something for a couple months,
Absolutely. Oh, Konrad, I love that skin ADD. I've never heard that and I love it. I can't tell you how many people come into me because, if I get in a new patient, we do ask that you bring what you're using. They bring in shopping bags full of stuff. And that's sort of like the worst thing you can do. So you're right. We've got to have this sort of, faithfulness to, if possible, to, give something a try. If you use too much stuff every day too, then you don't even always know what is or isn't working. Like to start a skincare regimen, it's a great idea not to do more than, I'd say like 4 things in the morning, 4 things at night. Something like this is more than enough.
Before I ask you the questions I ask everybody, I'll be a little greedy. What are the 2 main, if someone listening is only going to try 2 things in their routine, what are the most crucial, you think, for looking like you and keeping great skin?
Thank you.
2 crucial steps.
Okay. Well, this may sound a little corny, but I think really starting with the right cleanser and using it every single morning and night. And I'm sorry that I'm going to put the plug in for the one that we have that's called the Gentle Hydrating Cleanser.
I just got it. I love it. I love it because it foam, like as a guy, I like a foaming a little bit, but I know that the foaming could strip, but this one doesn't.
Exactly. So it is sulfate free because, those sulfates are not good, right? But it's got other sort of foaming ingredients, and it's got this amazing thing called marine algae that actually absorbs these tiny little particles before they get into our skin. So it's sort of like, you sleep on the pillowcase at night. It's loaded with dust mites that are carrying all this stuff that's going to bring you age spots, lines, wrinkles. You wash with that in the morning and at night, and it also sort of makes sure that you're not washing with something that can really hurt you. So that for sure. And then, I love what you said about that's how you love our intense replenishing. For me, it's just amazing barrier repair. It's got the strongest antioxidant, which is the lipochromin. When it comes to sunscreen, we're really lucky. We've won a lot of awards. Refinery 29 gave our sunscreen the Beauty Innovation Award. But what I always say about the sunscreen is, you can try ours. Of course, I love ours. I love it. It's my dream sunscreen. But the most important thing for sunscreen is to find one that you like, that you'll use every day.
Right.
And, I actually think that sometimes the whole idea that you've got to have sunscreen on is almost more overrated than that you've got to have good antioxidants on. Because if you're sitting inside, super important to have on the antioxidants to avoid all the irritants, all of that.
Wow. I feel like I'm getting the best free consult on this podcast.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, let's take a quick break. Today's episode is brought to you by my brand, Preston Konrad Home. I would love for you to come into my world of luxury home fragrance, responsibly made here in America, all for under $50. We've cut out the big box middlemen, and we are bringing the finest luxury fragrance right into your home. For you guys listening today on the show, you can take 10% off of any single item on PrestonKonradHome.com with the offer code BRANDME. That's PrestonKonradHome.com, offer code BRANDME. Hey, I ask these questions to everybody. Do you have a moment of building your brand that lives in your head rent-free, that was just a crazy memory, whether it was a great one or a wild one that you could share with me, like a takeaway moment?
Absolutely. It's a very personal one. I mentioned how two of my daughters have come on, our daughters have come on really to create this. I give them more credit in many ways than me to make the brand. And I would say my absolute moment that will forever live in my heart too is sitting around with my daughter, Gina, who's our CEO, who had been a Wall Street lawyer, one of the big Wall Street firms, had moved down to Florida and was going to, wanted to start a family. So I'm sitting with her husband too. And she realized that here, her choices were really not going to be that compatible with her lifestyle. And she and I just sort of locked eyes. And, my kids had always said to me, Mom, I've helped a lot of doctors, launch brands that, I formulated for them that have done so beautifully. So we sort of locked eyes and said, hey, you know what, Mommy, you still love practicing and all of this, but guess what? How about me helping you to launch your brand? Wow. And that will forever live on in my heart, in my psyche. Probably really, it's just the most wonderful gift that I've gotten. Well, all of my kids, I've got to mention the other two.
Yeah, of course.
One is the head of a nonprofit down here. Our son, Daniel, is the head of Miami Design Preservation League. You just can't imagine what he's done for Miami Beach. And our other daughter, my husband is a retired heart surgeon. So our fourth child, Katrina, is a doctor who is now at University of Miami, but she's practiced for 2 years in Africa and Uganda and Kenya.
You guys are not like you're that accomplished as a family. You're not doing much.
Well,
so I
think, the great success in life, it isn't really what you've got in your bank account or how famous you are on, Instagram or in the stores. It's really your loved ones and how much you can nurture each other. And in the case of a parent, it's how nurturing I think our children are to our community, to their fellow man. And so, sorry, I think I went off on a tangent.
That is so important. And I think now more than ever, coming out of this wild last couple years with this pandemic, I think everyone has realized what you just shared and how important that is. So, Dr. Loretta, this has been such an amazing chat. How can everybody find you and your brand on social? What are the handles?
Thank you. So actually, we've got two places to go on social: Dr. Loretta at Dr. Loretta and at Dr. Loretta Derm. And so it's DRLORETTA. That one, or at Dr. Loretta DRM. And I hope I'm really trying to help to sort of really spread a lot of, my knowledge. And that's the most important thing to me.
You really are. And keep it up. You're an inspiration. You're a light, and your products are really great. So you got a lifelong customer here. I'm so happy you joined me, and thank you again for taking the time. For more on the show, you can find us on Instagram at BrandMePodcast or at Preston Konrad. Be sure, of course, to rate, review, and subscribe and share on social. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.